articulate it yourself. For instance, Tessa, when she first read the first draft of the Raven Cycle, read it, and then she said, the only way that I would like Richard Campbell Gansey III is if he was dead in a ditch. Am I misconstruing this at all?
No, that's exactly what I said, except I didn't.
You didn't say Richard Campbell Gansey. You
I
just...
didn't respect him enough for his holiness.
Probably true. So these things are important because guess what? She was totally right, because if that book had gone out like that, you guys also would not like Nancy. Maybe you don't like Nancy anyway, but he's a little better now because of her. So really it's that I send a big chunk of it and they read it and they comment on it. They say what they like, what they don't like, and then I pretend like I don't agree with them, and then I get to work. Are you wearing my sunglasses? Is that happening?
We noticed that. What dark magic is this? Yes. I picked him up at an airport.
You picked them up at an airport?
Yeah.
I lost my last pair at an airport.
I picked him up at an airport.
Questions? I have a lot of questions now. Yeah. Am I ever going to write Requiem? I actually did write it once. Okay, so the Requiem is the third book in the Books of Fairies series, my debut in the second book, Lament and Ballad, about homicidal fairies. And so there was always supposed to be a third book, and I indeed wrote a third book, and I sent it to my editor, and he sent me edit notes, and I looked at it, and I thought, I don't like it. And so the thing is that it's fine, and fine is the very worst thing that a book can be. I either want you to love it or hate it, and right now it's just fine. So I told my editor I wasn't giving it back to him until I could figure out how to make it not fine, and he's fine with that. So one day it sits there on my hard drive being fine. I know it's the best, most encouraging answer ever. Questions? Yes.
From each series, do you have characters that when you write them, they're just like a blast for you?
A blast?
A blast.
Is it like a good kind of blast, or like a volcano and then lava is over my body?
That just come because like when I write, I feel like I have to get to know a lot of them. So like, do you have ones where almost from moment one they're there, and you feel like you know them?
I don't know. I go through a lot of drafts of my book actually while I'm writing it, because I know you're not supposed to edit as you go along, but I do, and I always have. And so my characters are always evolving, and for the first 10,000 words, I hate most of them because they feel like strangers. I have no idea why they're moving around the book. Why are you people here? What are you doing? Are you making yourself a sandwich? Are you a sandwich person? Can I edit that out later? Anyway, so most of them, yes, I don't instantly have a blast. However, I have to say George Holly from the Scorpio races, and he's a side character, the dashing American, and he just appeared, and Sean Kendrick called him the American, and it was like from that moment there was no other option for him to be except for George Holly, so that was a blast.
Oh, good.
Are you also wearing white aviators?
Yes.
Yes. Question? Why are there so many white aviators? Yes.
Who do you love the most out of all your characters?
Who do I love the most out of all of my characters? This is a really difficult question to answer, only because there's characters that I love as a reader. As a reader, I really love the Scorpio races. It was satisfying to both write and read. It was written so quickly and had been simmering for so long that I had a very unusual experience writing it, where I could actually feel like a reader while I was writing it. So I was exploring it in the same way that I might if I'd never seen it before. And so I really enjoy all of those characters there. But the character that I actually find that I love the most for being the most satisfying actually is Gansey. And the reason why is because he is the hardest character. Actually, those books in general are the hardest books to write. They're eating my legs. If you like the Raven Cycle, thank you, because I'm going to be so short when I come back to Utah next time. Anyway, so the thing I really love about writing Gansey, and the thing that makes it most difficult, is because most people are a slew of inconsistencies, but we're fine with it. We have no problem finding a way to work them all together. For instance, you guys mostly know Maggie Stiefvater. However, if I was walking along the street and I saw a little broken kitten by the sidewalk and I suddenly picked it up and nurtured it, you'd go, huh, I wouldn't normally have thought Maggie Stiefvater was the type to pick up a broken kitten and nurture it back to life. With mouth to mouth. That's a way to make the story more improbable. But I guess that's just a side of her I'd never seen before. Okay, fine, Maggie Stiefvater, kitten saver. I don't know CPR, that kitten is doomed. Anyway, so you'd have no problem really incorporating it, but when that happens in a book, a lot of times you'll just think it's an inconsistently written character. It will come off as kind of scattered. And so it's much harder to incorporate this. And so Gansey is my first real attempt to try and make a character who looks different to every character in that series and treats them all differently. And yet, when you stand back, you go, yeah, that's Gansey. So, yeah, Gansey.
I like Noah.
You like Noah? Aw, he likes kittens too. Questions? Yes.
Where did you get that idea?
Where did I get the idea for the Raven Cycle? Am I going to tell the story? It's probably embarrassing. I'm going to tell it. Okay, so when I was a small, terrible child, actually, I was at my parents' house the other night, and the day before I left for tour, actually, so it must have been the 25th of last year or something. Been on the road forever. I was at my parents' house, and I said, remember when I was a young and tender thing? And my dad went, I was like, you were never tender. And my mother was there hacking up some piece of meat, and she looks over and goes, you were never young. Anyway, so when I was a young and tender thing, I was one of those children that hated hugs. You know, when you try and hug them, they were first all elbows, and then they kind of went away like a mist. I was like a juvenile dementor. And then if you did manage to catch me, I would give you that look like I was deeply violated. Which I try to feel like I've gotten better as an adult. I no longer do the face, though deep down inside I'm wondering why you didn't buy me dinner first. Anyway, so that was me as a child, and I was always working away and writing, and I was also reading all of these books my parents were giving me. And my mom used to give me all of these old fantasies that had shiny Newbery stickers on the cover, and there were things like A Wrinkle in Time, and The Chronicles of Narnia, and Dino and Jones, and Susan Cooper's The Darkest Rising series. How many of you have read this series? Everyone who doesn't have their hand up, I've now unfollowed you on Twitter. Anyway, so on the one hand, my mother handing me all of these lovely fantasies, and on the other hand, my father, who was a flight surgeon in the Navy, which meant that he could fly planes, and if your arm fell off while you were flying, he could sew it back on. He was giving me his hand-me-down thrillers, and they were all called things like Shot Dead, and Dead Man Running, and Point Blank, and on the back was always a picture of the author wearing a leather jacket, and holding like a golden retriever, or an SUV, or Kalishnikov, you know, something like that. You know those books. And so the thing is that I loved them both equally as a teen. I didn't care if they had the shiny sticker on the back of them, or the golden retriever, or what. I loved them both. And so I kept on trying to write books that were like these. And the books that really melded them together were the ones I loved the best, even though I couldn't pull it off. And so it ties back into why I really loved Susan Cooper's books, because they felt like high fantasy, even though they were set in modern-day Wales. Well, at the time, modern day, it was 70s Wales. And magic came up through the sidewalks, and it felt as magical as high fantasy land, but it was set in real life. And so I thought, wow, it would be amazing to write a book that combined both of these things, Kalishnikovs and magic. And so I started to write this book when I was 19. And it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It's because I was a terrible writer, and the Raven Cycle represents basically all of the boss level things that I could not attain. With so many characters and so many mythologies and so much world building, it was terrible. And so I put it aside. And it wasn't until I wrote the Shiver trilogy and the Scorpio races and kind of got more character building and world building chops that I could actually pull it off. And so the embarrassing part is that, so Susan Cooper really was the basis of all of this, Welsh mythology in the real world. And I had a chance to meet her 2 years ago. It's important to note the 2 years ago part, because you will know that by then I had already had like a #1 New York Times bestseller, and I should have had some sort of professional decency about myself. Anyway, so we were at a conference, and my scholastic person said, so Maggie, Susan Cooper is here, would you like to meet her? And of course the answer was yes, and I imagined how it would go down. I would shake her hand and exchange an intellectual witticism, and then go galloping off with a story to tell future generations. That was the plan, and what actually happened was this. Okay, this will be Tracy from Scholastic. This will be me. This will be Susan Cooper. I'm going to play all of them. Maggie, this is Susan Cooper. Hello. It went on for so long that dozens of photographs were taken and put on Twitter. Later, my publicist said, "It looks like Susan Cooper was a cookie, and you wanted to eat her." So finally, after a very long time, I managed to say, "I just wanted to thank you for introducing me to mythology." You're welcome. Then after a very long time, I would have cut that out in the interest of pacing. I turned to her and I said, "Can I hug you?" Which is how I ended up hugging my lifelong childhood idol, a moment that I look back on, even now, with a combination of pleasure and humiliation, which is a terrible basis for any relationship, but also ties back into Sinner. Go!